The attorney who sued Chevron over environmental pollution in Ecuador and won, Stephen Donziger, he chose not to testify in his own defense in a new contempt case, saying there was, quote, no need to continue to legitimize what is essentially a charade.
The charges in the case, they stem from a class action lawsuit he was part of in 1993 over contamination from oil drilling in the Amazon. Closing arguments in that trial submitted in writing a couple weeks. Stephen Donziger, he joins us now to discuss that case, his own victory, and more. It's good to see you, Stephen. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So I know it can be a bit Byzantine for people. Detail exactly what you uncovered, the witch hunt against you, the trial outcome, etc., and then the current case.
Well, thank you again for having me. I'm probably a human rights lawyer. I've been practicing law for a bunch of years. I'm probably the target of the most well-financed corporate retaliation campaign in the history of our country, and it's culminated in a criminal contempt charge being filed against me by a judge after I refused to turn over my computer and cell phone to Chevron after I had helped my indigenous clients in Ecuador win a $9.5 billion pollution judgment against the company for dumping billions of gallons of toxic waste into the Amazon. So I think the salient point among many is that I am being prosecuted not by the U.S. government, but by Chevron. I mean, basically, the U.S. government, the SDNY, and the federal prosecutor here in New York refused to take up the charges when presented by the judge. And the judge then appointed a private law firm to prosecute me. They're being paid by taxpayer dollars, about $1 million so far on a misdemeanor. And it turns out that the law firm, Seward and Kissel, has a client relationship with none other than Chevron, the very company that I had crushed in court, along with a bunch of other lawyers down in Ecuador, in their preferred forum where they insisted the underlying trial be held. So all of this has led to this extraordinary situation where I was put on trial by this judge who charged me, prosecuted by an individual with direct financial links to Chevron. The main witnesses were Chevron lawyers. It turns out that a second Chevron law firm has spent millions of dollars bankrolling my private prosecution by using its lawyers to help the private prosecutors. And this is the first corporate prosecution in U.S. history. And frankly, I think it's terrifying what it means for our country. I mean, it's really a new corporate playbook that is designed to intimidate the heck out of lawyers and human rights defenders and campaigners, that is, people who take on the fossil fuel industry. So I'm in a difficult personal situation right now. I've been locked up in my home, by the way, on a misdemeanor for almost 2 years with an ankle bracelet. They're really targeting me, and it's Chevron, not the U.S. government, which is the scariest part.
Yeah. I mean, this is insane. You've been under house arrest for more than 650 days at this point, for a misdemeanor charge, by the way, as you point out. How does this happen? I mean, I think a lot of people listening to this who haven't been following your case would say this sounds insane, right? The U.S. government isn't willing to continue the prosecution. They just pick this other prosecutor whose law firm has financial ties to Chevron, put under house arrest for over 2 years over all of this. It's very clear from the facts that, look, Chevron's obviously mad at you because they lost a multi-billion-dollar settlement that you were involved with prosecuting against them. How does this happen in America?
Well, I'm asking myself the same question. I mean, first of all, the big picture is, I've been, instrumental really as a lawyer in the success of the case. And this is happening because we are successful and because Chevron faces enormous financial risk. And I was up in Canada when this judge charged me, working with a team of lawyers to enforce the Ecuador judgment against Chevron and its assets in Canada. And, he charged me. I came back to face these charges. It turns out, Crystal, that I'm literally the only person in this country, according to the research of my lawyers, who has been spent even one day deprived of his liberty pre-trial on a federal misdemeanor, even one day. And it's now been, today is 652 days. The maximum sentence ever given a lawyer convicted of my charge, and I have yet to be convicted, is 90 days of home confinement. And I've already been here over 8 times or even 9 times that amount. I think I've lost count. I have an ankle bracelet on my leg. I cannot take it off. I have to sleep with it, eat with it, bathe with it on, and I can't go anywhere except by court permission to very kind of narrow things like school meetings or legal meetings, medical appointments, and that kind of thing. It's obvious this is happening because of Chevron. The U.S. government declined to prosecute. If the U.S. government had prosecuted me, the DOJ, they never would have locked me up. I mean, people don't get locked up for misdemeanors when you have no criminal record. So this is basically a corporation, a giant oil company, taking control of the machinery of the public prosecution of our country. And by the way, that's precious machinery. I mean, that's the machinery that allows people to be deprived of their liberty. And Chevron has essentially ordered me into prison. I mean, the Wall Street Journal just reported a few days ago that back in 2010, 10 years ago, they tried to get the SDNY, the Manhattan federal prosecutor, to put me in prison, to indict me based on false charges, and they refused. So, there's been multiple times they've gone to the SDNY to try to prosecute me, and they refuse every time. They know the case and these charges are baseless. And they've now taken over the machinery of the prosecutorial power themselves. One thing we've asked people to do is to go to Joe Biden's administration, the DOJ, and demand they take back this prosecution from the private Chevron law firm and prosecute me directly. I know this is kind of odd, right? I'm probably the only lawyer in U.S. history who's begging the DOJ to prosecute because I need a professional who will negotiate, who will deal with this. I mean, Rita Glavin, who's the private Chevron prosecutor, won't even talk to us in good faith about a resolution, about letting me out of detention, so I can continue doing my human rights work. Ultimately, this is about two things for Chevron. I mean, one is to destroy me because they want to hold me up as kind of a symbol of something that, people shouldn't emulate. And the other thing, obviously, is to use me as a weapon to intimidate others who might want to do this critical frontline work that's necessary to hold polluters accountable and protect our planet. So, people need to understand this is happening. And luckily, we've gotten a ton of support as of late from people like Susan Sarandon, Roger Waters, Marianne Williamson, and thousands of others who joined the campaign. Lawyers and 68 Nobel Peace Laureates have demanded my release. Several human rights groups led by Amnesty International, law students from 53 different U.S. law schools have written a letter to Merrick Garland. They have not acted. Mm-hmm. You can't have private corporate prosecutions in a rule of law country, certainly not in the United States of America. So we are pressing the Department of Justice to stop this charade before it continues any further and release me so I can continue with my job, which is helping vulnerable indigenous communities who are suffering and dying from pollution that Chevron left, as confirmed by multiple courts in Ecuador and Canada.
Go ahead.
Stephen, what happens next?
Well, in the particular narrow piece of my contempt trial, where there was no jury, and the judge, Preska, who's a member of the Federalist Society, which is funded by Chevron, and you can't get away from Chevron in this case, has asked for post-trial briefs, so we'll submit those, and she almost certainly will find me guilty of contempt. She essentially stripped me of my defenses at trial by claiming I couldn't explain my thinking and protecting my client confidentiality and with not turning over my computer and cell phone, which is a solid defense. She wouldn't let me testify as to that. So we think we have great issues on appeal. So she will find me guilty. She will try to sentence me, possibly put me in jail. I hope she does not. But I don't know. I sort of think that might be her plan. You sort of can't lock someone up pre-trial for 2 years and then not put them in jail, because the whole theory behind her locking me up in my own home was I would flee to avoid jail. Mm-hmm. So I think she plans to put me in jail. I think she should not. I think that would be terribly unjust. I think it'd be bad for me, bad for my clients. I think it'd be bad for Chevron and bad for our judicial system. But if she does put me in jail, I will appeal and try to stay out, and obviously appeal a conviction if it comes down. And ultimately, the goal is to get out of this situation and continue working with all the other lawyers around the world who are helping the people of Ecuador who are suffering enforce their judgment, so Chevron has to comply with the rule of law.
Yeah. And where can people find out more about the case?
Go to freedonziger.org. It's one word, F-R-E-E, Donziger, D-O-N-Z-I-G-E-R, and you can join our campaign. We have a defense fund. It takes a ton of resources to deal with this monster that's attacking me. If you can donate even a little, we'd appreciate it. But the more important point is go to the site, learn more about the case, and join our campaign.
Perfect. All right.
Thanks, Stephen. We'll keep following it. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and inform our viewers.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Our pleasure. We'll have more Rising for you after this.